Elias Grant sat stiffly in his seat at the enormous, circular chamber that housed the Galactic Council. The dome above him shimmered with light from 1,000 different stars, representing the countless worlds united under the Council's jurisdiction. For a human, the sight was supposed to be awe-inspiring. Instead, Elias felt every bit the outsider. To his left, a row of blue-skinned Tehans whispered to one another, their wide black eyes occasionally darting toward him. On his right, a pair of towering Orcs kept their golden-scaled arms crossed, their slit-pupil gazes fixed forward. No one addressed him directly. No one even acknowledged his presence. The council floor was abuzz with motion as delegates filed into their seats. Elias leaned over to his colleague and closest friend, Michael Ross, who had been appointed his aide on this assignment. Michael had a knack for keeping calm even in situations as tense as this. "Well," Elias murmured, "I don't think we're winning any popularity contests here." Michael smirked. "Just remember, they invited us to this assembly. We still have the right to speak. Until they take that away, too." Elias exhaled, staring down at the datapad in his hands. His speech was prepared, but what good would words do if no one was willing to listen? Across the room, the Supreme Chancellor, an elegant Visari with flowing silver hair and robes that seemed to shimmer with their own light, rose from her seat. The chamber quieted instantly. Her voice carried effortlessly through the air as she addressed the delegates. "Today we convene to address the petition of the Terran Confederation," she began. "Their request for full membership within the Galactic Council has been carefully reviewed. After much deliberation, we have reached a decision." Elias leaned forward. Michael glanced at him, his expression cautious. They both knew what was coming, but Elias still felt his chest tighten. The Chancellor's voice grew firm. "The Council has determined that the Terran Confederation does not meet the criteria for membership. While humanity's progress is noted, the prevailing view is that your species is not yet prepared to contribute meaningfully to the responsibilities of this assembly. As such, your petition is denied." Elias closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady himself. He could feel the weight of every gaze in the room. Some delegates looked indifferent, others almost pitying. None of them seemed surprised. Michael shifted beside him. "Elias, maybe you should say something?" "Yeah, I know." Elias rose to his feet, his voice cutting through the stillness. "With all due respect, Chancellor, the decision seems less about readiness and more about preconceived notions. Humanity has proven its ability to adapt, innovate, and cooperate. Isn't that what the Council stands for?" The Chancellor tilted her head, her silvery eyes glinting. "Captain Grant, the Council's decision is final. This assembly was not called to debate our conclusion. Final or not, humanity deserves a fair assessment," Elias pressed. "We're not asking for charity. We're asking for a chance. Your decision isn't just a rejection of Earth. It's a message to every emerging civilization that you'll judge them by their past, rather than their potential." A few murmurs rippled through the room, but they were short-lived. The Chancellor raised a hand, and silence returned. "Captain Grant, your passion is noted, but the Council's responsibility is to uphold the stability of the galaxy. We cannot take unnecessary risks." Elias opened his mouth to argue further, but Michael tugged on his arm. "Not here," Michael said under his breath. "Not now." Reluctantly, Elias sat back down, his jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the datapad. The Chancellor continued with the session's agenda, as if nothing important had been discussed, as if humanity's future on the galactic stage was a minor footnote in a larger story. When the assembly adjourned, Michael followed Elias out of the chamber. They stepped into a wide, open corridor lined with glowing panels that displayed rotating star maps. A few delegates lingered, casting sidelong glances at the humans as they passed. Elias didn't care. "You had to say something," Michael said. "I get it, but you knew they weren't going to change their minds." "Maybe not now," Elias replied, "but someday they'll see what we're capable of. I'm not going to stand by and let them dismiss us without a fight." Michael chuckled softly. "Well, You might be the only human crazy enough to argue with the Chancellor in open session. Elias turned to his friend, a faint smile breaking through his frustration. Maybe, but you're just as crazy for coming along with me. Someone has to keep you from getting thrown out an airlock, Michael said. They both laughed, the tension of the moment easing just a little. But as they made their way back to their ship, Elias's resolve only grew stronger. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity. Now it was up to him, and anyone who believed in their cause, to prove them wrong. Elias Grant stood at the viewport of the Nova Dawn's observation deck, staring at the swirling blue and green orb of Earth as the ship approached orbit. The Council's rejection still weighed on him, and his usually sharp demeanor had dulled under the strain of disappointment. Michael Ross leaned against the frame of the doorway, watching his captain with a raised eyebrow. You're going to bore a hole through the planet if you keep glaring at it like that, Michael said. Elias didn't respond at first. Instead, he tapped a finger against the glass, muttering, "They don't even see what's right in front of them." "Well, they're not looking at Earth now," Michael said, walking over to join him. "What's next? Go back to the council chamber and shout a little louder." "Tempting," Elias said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But no, we need a different approach." Before Michael could ask what he meant, the door behind them slid open with a hiss. Tazara, the Evendarii diplomat who had joined them after the council's verdict, stepped into the room. Her movements were graceful, her pale green skin seeming to glow faintly under the soft lights of the deck. She carried a data slate in one hand, her long silver hair flowing behind her. "Captain Grant, might I have a moment?" Tazara's voice was calm but carried a tone of urgency. Michael raised an eyebrow at the formality. "Sure," Elias said, gesturing for her to speak. "What's on your mind?" Tazara glanced at Michael before continuing. "I've been reviewing your planetary data and historical records. Your species has made significant strides in a relatively short time, and yet, I find the Council's judgment unsurprising." Michael's brow furrowed. "So you agree with them, then?" "I didn't say that," Tazara replied smoothly. "I said I'm not surprised. The Council values tradition and long-term stability. Earth is a newcomer, one they view as unpredictable. What you need is credibility. We're not exactly swimming in that after what happened," Elias said dryly. "That may be true," Tazara said, "but I believe there are opportunities to change that perception. If we can demonstrate something unique about humanity, something the Council cannot ignore, it may force them to reconsider." "And how do you suggest we do that?" Elias asked, crossing his arms. Tazara paused, considering her words carefully. "I'd like to visit Earth myself. If I can better understand your people, I might find the key to convincing my colleagues that their judgment was premature. I need to see what you believe makes humanity worth defending." Elias and Michael exchanged a glance. It wasn't exactly the solution they'd envisioned, but Elias had to admit, she had a point. He nodded slowly. "All right, we'll show you, but don't expect a fairy tale. You'll see the good and the bad." "That's exactly what I need," Tazara said. "The full picture." The three of them spent the next few hours planning their itinerary. Michael took the lead in proposing locations, cities that showcased human ingenuity, cultural landmarks that held centuries of history, and even rural communities that highlighted humanity's adaptability. Tazara listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions about population demographics, resource distribution, and political dynamics. As they worked, the tension in the room began to fade. Tazara's sharp intellect and Michael's humor seemed to balance Elias's intensity. They weren't just a thrown-together crew anymore. They were becoming a team. "So, what's first on the list?" Elias asked as they finished up the initial plans. "Old Terra," Michael said, grinning. "Nothing says, we're worth keeping around like showing her where it all started." Tazara arched an elegant eyebrow. "Old Terra." "You'll see," Michael replied. "It's not the prettiest, but it'll help you understand why we are the way we are." Elias glanced out the viewport one last time before turning back to his companions. "All right, Let's show her what Earth is really made of. As the nova dawn descended into Earth's atmosphere, Elias felt a flicker of hope. They had a long way to go, but at least now they had a chance to prove themselves, not to the council but to someone who might actually listen. Michael squinted up at the massive skyscrapers lining the streets of Old Terra. The city, long considered humanity's historic core, was a chaotic blend of the ancient and the cutting edge. Centuries-old stone structures jutted up beside sleek, transparent towers that shimmered in the sunlight. The streets bustled with people, a mix of locals, off-world visitors, and the occasional alien diplomat. Tazara, walking between Michael and Elias, appeared both intrigued and cautious. Her keen eyes darted from the holographic advertisements to the street vendors peddling handmade goods. A trio of musicians played an energetic tune on a corner, drawing a small crowd. Despite her measured demeanor, there was a hint of curiosity in her step. So, Tazara began, her voice calm but thoughtful. This is Old Terra, your cultural epicenter. I can see why you chose it. There's an energy here, something raw. Elias nodded. Raw is a good word for it. This city was almost destroyed more times than I can count. Somehow it always bounced back. Michael chuckled, hands shoved into his jacket pockets. It's not just about bouncing back. It's about reinvention. Look at those buildings. He gestured to a block of mismatched architecture. You've got a pre-unification cathedral next to a 50-story tech hub. It's like the past, present, and future are having a constant argument. Tazara's expression softened. I see. It's not just about preserving history. It's about using it as a foundation to build something new. Exactly, Michael said. You can't erase where you've been. You just keep building on top of it, figuring out what works. Elias stepped into a small plaza, waving them forward. In the center stood a circular fountain, its intricate carvings depicting famous events in human history. Nearby, a food vendor handed out something that smelled tantalizingly savory. Hungry? Elias asked, catching Michael's glance. I could eat, Michael replied. What about you, Tazara? Ever tried Earth food before? She hesitated, glancing at the vendor's offerings. Not directly. We have dietary replicators that synthesize food based on molecular scans, but I've never consumed a meal made by hand. Michael grinned. Well, this is your lucky day. Come on. The trio approached the stand, and Michael quickly ordered a plate of something fried and steaming. Tazara accepted the plate with both hands, studying the food like it was an artifact from an alien world. Elias leaned against a nearby bench, watching her reaction. It's not going to bite you, he said, smirking. Tazara shot him a mildly reproachful look before taking a careful bite. Her expression changed almost instantly, surprise, then cautious enjoyment. This is unexpected. The flavor is far more complex than I anticipated. Told you, Michael said, grabbing his own portion. Food's one of those universal connectors. No matter what planet you're on, you can learn a lot about people from what they eat. Elias leaned closer. And from how they share it. A meal isn't just nutrition. It's tradition, memory, and community all in one. Tazara nodded slowly, taking another bite. I can see why your species holds onto certain cultural practices, even as your technology advances. There's a depth here, a willingness to remember while moving forward. Elias smiled. That's one way of putting it. Michael gestured to a set of steps leading up to a large open-air marketplace. Let's keep moving. There's something you need to see. The market was a cacophony of sights and sounds. Merchants calling out deals, shoppers haggling, artists painting vivid landscapes, and children running through the crowded aisles. Tazara's normally composed expression softened further as she watched a young boy present a handmade trinket to his father, who knelt down with a broad grin and ruffled the boy's hair. It's fascinating, Tazara murmured. In the council chambers, your species is viewed as chaotic, unruly. But here, it feels more alive. That's the part they don't get, Elias said, stepping beside her. They think order is the only way to thrive. But sometimes the messiness of life, the struggles, the conflicts, makes us who we are. Michael leaned on a rail overlooking the market square. And who we are isn't perfect, not by a long shot. But that imperfection is what lets us keep changing, keep adapting. It's why we're still here. Tazara glanced between the two of them, as if weighing their words carefully. She wasn't ready to draw any final conclusions, but something in her stance had shifted. The doubt that had lingered in her expression was now tempered by something else. Curiosity. "Show me more," she said at last. "If I'm to understand your people, I need to see all sides." Elias smiled. "You've got it. Come on. There's a place a few blocks down I think you'll find interesting." As the trio moved through the city's winding streets, they began to feel less like a captain, an aide, and an alien diplomat, and more like three individuals exploring a world together. Tazara started to ask more questions. About the music they heard drifting from open windows, the art that adorned the walls, and the stories behind the landmarks they passed. Elias and Michael answered eagerly, often finishing each other's sentences. By the time the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the city, they'd walked miles and talked for hours. Tazara wasn't ready to call humanity perfect. Far from it. But for the first time, she could see why Elias and Michael believed so strongly in their species' worth. For the first time, she began to wonder if the council might have been too quick to judge. Elias adjusted the microphone at the podium, his nerves masked by a steady expression. The cultural exchange event was one of the largest gatherings on Earth in years, and the stakes felt enormous. Delegates from dozens of species were in attendance, seated in the spacious auditorium that glimmered with lights reflecting off alien metals and human glasswork. The blend of the old and the new filled the air, making it almost electric. Michael stood off to the side of the stage, arms crossed, a lopsided grin on his face. He gave Elias a thumbs up as Elias prepared to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished representatives, and esteemed guests," Elias began, his voice firm. "We've gathered here tonight not just to showcase our unique cultures, but to share them. This exchange is more than a performance or a demonstration. It's a conversation, one that transcends borders, species, and languages." He glanced at Tazara, who was seated in the front row, her luminous silver hair catching the light. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were focused intently on him. She told him earlier she wasn't sure what to expect. Elias was determined to show her something that might, at least for a moment, make her see humanity differently. "The first presentation," he said, "is a collaboration between human musicians and dancers from the Trivan species. They've created a piece that blends Earth's traditional string instruments with Trivan harmonics. Please enjoy." The lights dimmed as a group of performers took the stage. The music began, soft and haunting at first, then building to a powerful crescendo. Strings wove together with alien tonalities, creating a sound that was at once familiar and completely new. The dancers moved in perfect synchrony, their forms reflecting the combined influence of both human and Trivan movement styles. When the performance ended, the room erupted in applause. Elias scanned the audience, pleased to see not just polite clapping, but genuine enthusiasm. Even Tazara seemed impressed, her hands coming together in a rare display of emotion. As more acts followed, paintings that combined Terran landscapes with alien celestial imagery, sculptures crafted by human Evandarii teams. Michael leaned over to Elias. "Looks like they're buying it," he whispered, his voice low but teasing. Elias smirked. "Not buying, appreciating. There's a difference." "Sure," Michael replied, winking. "You just keep telling yourself that." When it came time for the final presentation, Tazara herself took the stage. Elias watched as she stood there, poised and graceful, addressing the audience. "I am not here as a mere observer," she said. "I am here to contribute. What you are about to see is an ancient Evandarii art form, a holographic performance that we once used to tell the history of our people. Tonight, however, I will share a story I have only recently come to understand. The story of humanity's capacity to adapt, to grow, and to create." Her hands moved in fluid, deliberate patterns, activating a series of delicate projections. The lights formed intricate shapes that danced through the air, first depicting Earth's tumultuous history, its wars, its hardships, and then transitioning into moments of innovation, exploration, and unity. The audience was captivated. Even Michael, who normally had a sarcastic quip ready at all times, remained silent. After her presentation, Tazara returned to her seat. Elias caught her eye and nodded. She responded with the faintest smile, a subtle yet significant gesture. "All right," Michael said, leaning closer to Elias. "I'll admit it. That was pretty amazing." Elias folded his arms. "Told you she had it in her." Michael grinned. "You always have to be right, don't you? Just when it matters." As the event concluded, Elias approached Tazara. "You've done something incredible," he said quietly. "I think you helped more people here understand that we're not so different after all." Tazara studied him for a moment, her silver eyes reflecting the room's fading light. "You and your people are not what I expected, Captain Grant. I believe there's more to this journey than I originally thought." Michael wandered over, offering her a small box wrapped in a simple ribbon. "A little Earth custom," he said. "Something to remember the night by." Tazara tilted her head as she accepted the gift. "A gesture of goodwill?" "Exactly," Michael replied. "It's a thing we do. Share something small but meaningful." Tazara opened the box to find a handcrafted pendant inside, its design a blend of human and even Darii motifs. She looked. Them lingered a little longer, the echoes of applause still ringing in the background. The cultural exchange had been a success, but it felt like something more had taken root that night, a genuine connection, one that went beyond politics or strategy. For the first time, Elias felt that they weren't just showing humanity's worth. They were forging something real, something that might just change the way the galaxy viewed them. Elias Grant was the first to spot the trader's vessel as it came into view, a sleek, jagged silhouette against the dark expanse of space. He tapped the console in front of him, bringing up a detailed scan of the ship. The readouts confirmed what he'd suspected. The vessel's registry had been falsified. A sharp pang of unease hit his stomach. "This looks bad," Elias muttered. He glanced over his shoulder at Michael, who was manning the weapons console. "I don't think they're here to say hello." Michael's fingers danced over the controls, verifying Elias's assessment. "You sure about this? Maybe they just want to trade." "No," Elias interrupted. "Look at that formation. They're circling us like a pack of wolves." Tazara, seated at a secondary station nearby, straightened her posture. "What should we do, Captain Grant?" Elias stared at the console a moment longer before making his decision. "Shields up, but hold your fire. Let's see what they want." The main view screen flickered as the traders opened a comm channel. A grizzled alien with a scar running down the side of his scaled face appeared. His voice was rough, dripping with malice. "Terran ship, this is the merchant vessel Krylax. We're here for a routine inspection. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Inspection, huh? Last time I checked, private merchants don't have the authority to board Earth vessels. Identify yourselves properly." The trader sneered. "You're not in a position to argue, human. Lower the shields, or we'll do it for you." Michael leaned closer to Elias, his voice low. "You think they've got the firepower to back that up?" "Doesn't matter," Elias said, his tone calm but firm. He turned back to the screen. "You'll get nothing from us. I suggest you move along." The trader's expression darkened, and the comm abruptly cut out. A moment later, the enemy vessel's weapons powered up. Tazara tensed in her seat. "They're charging their weapons." Michael's hands hovered over the controls. "Orders, Captain? Brace for evasive maneuvers," Elias ordered. "And don't shoot unless you have to. I want to make it clear we're not the aggressors here." The ship lurched as the traders opened fire, their plasma blasts slamming against the shields. Sparks flew from a nearby console, but the Nova Dawn held steady. Michael gritted his teeth. "I hope this don't shoot plan of yours works, Elias." "They're looking for a prize," Elias said. "They want our cargo and our ship intact. That's their leverage." If we give them a fight, they might destroy us outright. Tazara's fingers flew over her controls, scanning the attacker's ship. Their shields are weaker on the aft side. A well-placed maneuver could put us out of their firing arc. Elias nodded. Good thinking. Michael, plot a course around their rear and keep us moving. We'll see how long they want to chase us before they reconsider. Michael grinned. Finally, something fun. He fired up the engines and spun the Nova Dawn into a sharp turn, narrowly dodging another barrage. Tazara relayed positioning updates as Michael expertly guided the ship into a more favorable position. The traders pressed their attack, but it quickly became clear that the Nova Dawn wasn't an easy target. Each maneuver by Michael seemed to frustrate the attackers more. Tazara noticed it first, a drop in the traders' firing rate. Their weapons output is decreasing. It appears they're trying to conserve energy. Elias smirked. Looks like they didn't expect us to be this slippery. Keep at it. The chase continued, but the traders grew more hesitant with every passing moment. Finally, after a particularly well-timed dodge by Michael, the enemy vessel veered off. They received no further communication from the traders as their ship faded into the distance. Michael leaned back in his seat, letting out a low whistle. That was too close. You think they'll come back? Doubt it, Elias said. They were looking for an easy mark. They know now we're not worth the trouble. Tazara turned to Elias, her expression thoughtful. Your response was calculated, yet effective. I admit, I was skeptical at first, but it seems you knew exactly how to handle the situation. Elias shrugged, trying to downplay it. We've had our share of close calls. It's all about keeping a level head. Michael laughed. Level head? You were sweating just as much as I was. Admit it. Elias shot him a look, but a small smile broke through. Fine, maybe a little. Tazara tilted her head. If this is how you handle unexpected threats, I can see why you value cooperation so highly. You didn't just rely on strength. You relied on your crew's abilities and adapted to the circumstances. Exactly, Elias said. You don't win by brute force alone. Sometimes it's about making the other guy think twice about trying to take you on. Michael chuckled. That, and having a really good pilot. Elias rolled his eyes. Don't let it go to your head. As the three of them shared a laugh, the tension of the encounter began to fade. It had been a close call, but it had also been a reminder that teamwork and trust could get them through even the toughest situations. The lakeside cabin was small and quiet, a place Elias always retreated to when he needed space to think. Tonight, the still water reflected the faint light of the moon and stars, painting the landscape in muted silvers and blues. It was a stark contrast to the chaos they'd faced only a day earlier. Michael stood outside by the fire pit, his breath visible in the crisp air. He prodded at the flames with a stick, the orange light dancing on his face. Not bad for a getaway spot, he said, glancing back at Elias. You sure know how to pick him. It's not much, Elias replied from the cabin's porch. But it does the job. Tazara appeared at the cabin door, a woolen blanket draped around her shoulders. She stepped down carefully, her silver hair catching the firelight. It's peaceful. I can see why you come here. Michael grinned. You should have seen Elias dragging me out here the first time. I thought I was going to get eaten by a bear. Elias smirked. You deserved it after making fun of my old shuttle. That thing was held together by duct tape. Michael shot back, laughing. Tazara raised an eyebrow. Duct tape. An adhesive humans use, Elias explained. It's a crude but effective repair tool. It sounds charmingly resourceful, Tazara said, her tone dry but amused. Michael waved his stick toward her. See? She gets it. The three of them settled around the fire, letting the warmth seep into their hands. For a while, the only sounds were the crackling flames and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Eventually, Tazara spoke. Elias, Michael, your planet is unlike anything I've encountered. I've always viewed humanity from a distance, as most of my kind do. But now, seeing it up close, you're starting to like us, aren't you? Michael teased, elbowing Elias. She's totally falling for Earth. Tazara's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. I admit I've come to appreciate certain aspects. Your music, for example. Your art. And your companionship. Elias felt his chest tighten slightly. He glanced at Michael, who was grinning like an idiot, then back at Tazara. We're glad you're here, he said simply. Michael stretched, standing up. All right, I'm gonna hit the cabin. Let you two enjoy the fire. He gave Elias a knowing look before heading inside, leaving the other two alone. Tazara shifted closer to the flames, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Michael has a certain charm, she said, a touch of amusement in her voice. Yeah, you get used to him, Elias said, smiling. He's a good friend. One of the best. The conversation drifted for a while, covering everything from Earth's history to Tazara's own people. She spoke of the Evandariai's long traditions, their isolation from the wider galaxy, and how she had always been curious about other civilizations. Elias shared stories of his childhood, his first spaceflight, and the moment he decided to join the diplomatic corps. At some point, the distance between them grew smaller. Tazara's arm brushed Elias's as she reached for another log to add to the fire. The contact lingered just a moment too long, drawing both their gazes. Elias cleared his throat. I can do that, he offered, reaching for the log. I don't mind, Tazara replied, her voice soft. When she sat back, the firelight reflected in her silver eyes. Elias couldn't look away. There was something in her gaze, a warmth, an openness that hadn't been there before. Slowly, as if testing the waters, he reached out. His hand brushed hers lightly, and when she didn't pull away, his fingers settled over hers. Tazara's expression softened. She didn't say anything at first, but the corners of her mouth turned up ever so slightly. Her fingers shifted under his, and for a moment, the world felt incredibly small, like it was just the two of them against the vast universe. You're very unexpected, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Is that a good thing? Elias asked, his voice equally quiet. I'm not sure yet, she admitted, but I'd like to find out. The fire crackled, sending tiny sparks into the night. Elias smiled. I think I'd like that too. Elias stood on the bridge of the Nova Dawn, staring at the message glowing on the central view screen. It was an emergency summons from the Galactic Council. The words were clear. All ambassadors were to return immediately for an unscheduled session. No explanation, no context, just an order. Michael leaned over the console, arms folded as he frowned at the text. They don't waste any time, do they? No, they don't, Elias replied. He turned to Tazara, who was reviewing her own console at a nearby station. Any idea what this could be about? Tazara didn't look up. I'm not certain. The council rarely convenes outside its standard calendar, unless there is a major shift in policy or an unforeseen crisis. Michael grunted. Great. Probably another lecture about how humanity doesn't measure up. Elias rubbed the back of his neck, considering their options. The timing was odd, and the lack of details made him uneasy. Still, they couldn't ignore a direct summons. Set course for the council chambers, he ordered. We'll find out what's going on soon enough. As the Nova Dawn jumped into FTL, the three of them gathered in the conference room to prepare. Elias sat at the head of the table, Michael and Tazara flanking him. The tension in the air was palpable. So, Michael said, breaking the silence, what's the plan if this is another round of why humans can't be trusted? Elias exhaled sharply. We stick to the facts. We've shown them what Earth has to offer, and Tazara's seen it firsthand. If they want to argue, we'll give them something to think about. Tazara glanced at him, her expression neutral but her tone cautious. While I am prepared to speak on humanity's behalf, I suggest tempering expectations. The Council is not known for sudden reversals. Michael leaned back in his chair. What you're saying is, don't get our hopes up. I'm saying we must be realistic, she said. However, that does not mean we should remain silent. Elias nodded. That's all I need to hear. If they give us the floor, we'll make our case. The ship dropped out of FTL a few hours later, arriving at the sprawling hub of the Galactic Council's primary assembly station. Elias, Michael, and Tazara stepped into the massive chamber, the buzz of dozens of alien languages filling the air. Delegates from across the galaxy were already gathered, their voices creating a steady hum that echoed off the high walls. The Supreme Chancellor raised a hand, silencing the room. Her presence commanded respect, her flowing silver robes catching the light as she addressed the assembly. Delegates, thank you for arriving on such short notice. We have received troubling information that requires immediate attention. Elias exchanged a glance with Michael. Whatever this was, it didn't sound routine. The Chancellor continued, a rogue faction unaffiliated with any recognized member state has begun targeting Council-protected trade routes. Their actions jeopardize our collective security and stability. As such, we must discuss how best to respond. Michael leaned closer to Elias and whispered, that's got nothing to do with us, right? Maybe not directly, Elias whispered back. But let's not relax just yet. As the Chancellor laid out the details of the threat, it became clear that this faction had already caused significant damage. Several smaller trading worlds had been left vulnerable, and the Council needed to decide whether to deploy a unified force or rely on member states to handle the situation independently. When the Chancellor opened the floor for discussion, a wave of voices rose in the chamber. Delegates debated fiercely, some arguing for a rapid military response, others for a more measured approach. Elias noticed Tazara watching the proceedings with a focused intensity. Something on your mind? He asked quietly. She tilted her head. This is an opportunity. If humanity contributes to the solution, the Council will have no choice but to reassess their judgment. Elias frowned. You think they'll let us help after everything they've said about Earth? They might not have a choice, she replied. The faction's actions threaten all trade networks, including those involving human worlds. If you offer assistance, you demonstrate not only capability, but also a willingness to stand with the rest of the galaxy. Michael raised an eyebrow. And if they refuse? We just end up looking like the eager kid nobody wants on their team. Tazara met his gaze. That may happen, but if the offer is made sincerely and publicly, the Council cannot easily dismiss it without appearing biased. Elias weighed her words carefully. He stood, his movement drawing the attention of nearby delegates. Slowly, he made his way to the central podium, the room gradually quieting as he approached. When he spoke, his voice was steady. If this faction is threatening Council-protected routes, then Earth has a stake in this as well. We're ready to contribute, whether that's supplies, ships, or personnel. We've been dismissed before, but I'm standing here to say that humanity will not stand by while others suffer. A ripple of murmurs spread through the assembly. The Chancellor regarded Elias with a measured expression. Captain Grant, your offer is noted. The Council will consider all options before making a final decision. Elias returned to his seat, his heart pounding. Michael leaned over, grinning. Well, you just put Earth on the map. Let's see how that plays out. Tazara said nothing, but her faint smile and the approving nod she gave Elias spoke volumes. Whatever happened next, they had at least made it clear that humanity was no longer content to sit quietly in the background. Elias adjusted the collar of his uniform and surveyed the crowded assembly chamber. The towering spires of the Galactic Council station stretched above him, shimmering under artificial starlight. It was a rare moment, one where silence fell over the room, where even the most opinionated delegates held their tongues in collective anticipation. Michael leaned close, speaking under his breath. You'd think they were about to announce the end of the galaxy. Feels that way, Elias replied quietly. His hands rested against the edge of the podium, steady despite the tension crackling through the chamber. Nearby, Tazara stood composed as ever, her silver gaze scanning the crowd. She offered a brief nod of reassurance. Elias took a deep breath and stepped forward. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice strong but measured. Humanity came here not to plead, but to contribute. Over the past months, we've proven we can work alongside others. We've shown that cooperation is possible, that Earth's strength lies in its ability to adapt and innovate. Michael smirked faintly, whispering, "You're laying it on thick." Elias shot him a side glance. "We need thick right now," he muttered before continuing. "We know we're not perfect. We've made mistakes. Plenty of them. But we've also learned. And now, faced with the challenge of maintaining stability in this galaxy, we're not asking for a handout. We're offering our hand. Let us stand as equals, and you might just see what humanity is truly capable of." The room remained silent for a beat longer than Elias expected. Then, slowly, murmurs spread through the delegates. Some nodded, others exchanged glances. The Supreme Chancellor, standing at her raised platform, motioned for quiet. "Thank you, Captain Grant," she said. "The Council will deliberate on your words before rendering a decision." Elias returned to his seat, feeling Michael's hand slap his shoulder. "Nice one." Even the crusty old senators looked impressed. Tazara leaned closer, her voice calm. "That was well said, Captain. You presented your argument without appearing desperate." "I'll take that as a compliment," Elias replied, though his heart was still racing. "Now we just have to see if it made a difference." Hours passed as the council deliberated behind closed doors. Delegates milled about the chamber, some engaging in hushed discussions, others simply waiting in silence. Elias, Michael, and Tazara found a quieter corner to sit and regroup. "You know," Michael said, "even if they don't give us full membership, at least we're on their radar now. That's got to count for something." "It's not about making noise," Elias replied. "It's about getting them to see that we're here to stay." Tazara gave a slight nod. "Persistence is not easily ignored. Even if the council's decision is not what you hope, it does not mean the end of the road. Progress is often made in small steps." Elias sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I just wish it didn't always feel like climbing uphill." Michael chuckled. "Hey, that's the human way, right? Just keep climbing." Tazara's expression softened as she regarded Elias. "Regardless of the outcome, know that you have gained allies. That, in itself, is a victory." A sharp chime echoed through the chamber, drawing everyone's attention. The Supreme Chancellor and the council members re-entered, their robes gleaming under the chamber lights. The room fell silent as the Chancellor approached the central podium. "The Galactic Council has reached its decision," she announced. "While Earth will not yet be granted full membership, we recognize the potential your people have shown. As such, we are establishing a provisional status, allowing limited participation in council proceedings and access to certain trade routes. This arrangement will be reassessed in the coming cycles." The declaration was met with mixed reactions. Some delegates applauded, others simply murmured among themselves. Elias felt a wave of relief mixed with frustration. It wasn't the full acceptance he'd hoped for, but it was something, a step forward. Elias nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We're not done yet." As the delegates began filing out, Elias, Michael, and Tazara stood together at the edge of the chamber. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time, they felt a small crack in the barriers that had held Earth back. It wasn't a grand triumph, but it was a start. One they could build on, one they could turn into something lasting. And as the chamber emptied, the three of them stood side by side, quietly determined to keep climbing, step by step, until the galaxy had no choice but to recognize what humanity could offer.